If you are going out to see F1, then I think you will get exactly what you expect out of it. If you're expecting to see some cars go vroom, you'll get that. If you're expecting that it'll be kind of melodramatic and uninspiring in the structure, you'll also get that. It's just going to depend on how you balance those things. If you're just there for pure thrills, which I think a lot of people will be, then I think you will be happy with the product. To me, I think the excitement and the intrigue of the racing is enough to outweigh a predictable structure and acceptable but underwhelming talking. Before I give the quick plot summary, just take a second, formulate a guess of what you think the movie would be about. F1, the movie, stupid title, has racing legend Sonny Hayes, who is coaxed out of retirement to lead a struggling Formula One team and mentor a hotshot young driver, while chasing one more chance at glory. Probably what you'd expect. For context, I knew next to nothing about F1 going into the film, and maybe afterwards I still know next to nothing, but if anything, knowing little about the sport might add to the effectiveness. For a couple reasons. One is there is a play-by-play announcer throughout a significant portion of the racing sections. He is very good. I actually like the announcer as an announcer, but also because his contributions they don't feel very redundant to me as someone who does not really know the sport. It doesn't feel like he's telling me the obvious because I don't really know what the obvious is necessarily. So I think his contributions are good, and also I am the kind of person that is trying to help along, I think. So it works for me. But the other advantage, I think, is that I don't know the ways in which races usually happen or the way gaps are overcome in the races. Like, I don't know if it's possible for someone to go from like last to first. I don't know what is a reasonable time gap to make up all this stuff. I don't really care about like the realism anyway, but even like I'm not constrained by my knowledge of what realism would look like. So the movie can do basically whatever it wants in that department, and it'll probably work on me because I just don't know any better. Hans Zimmer scores the film, and while I think his score has its strengths and weaknesses, when we are racing, it has a great just electronic music sensibility. It's no challengers, but it has the right energy. It gets the job done. It keeps propelling you through those scenes with good energy. If anything, I think the electronic score is probably a little better than I want to give it credit for, because either due to maybe my theater not being super well calibrated or due to the sound mix in the film, it feels like some details in the score are lost in the racing scenes due to just like the engines and the sound of the racing being a little bit more overwhelming than they should be. Because I can kind of like barely make out some more details to the music besides just like a kick and snare, but they are difficult to tell, difficult to discern. So there might be more to appreciate listening to the score on its own, I think, than in the film. The energy of the actual racing is quite good. The first person racing shots for the cars, very effective. I think that gives a great feel for just how apparently fast they're going. That really helps underscore how hard it is to control the cars, how urgent things like worn tires could be, right? Because you see them taking the turns. Even when they slow down, it feels pretty fast. And you can kind of intuit that things like tires, things like just anything on the car hardware makes a lot of sense why it needs to have like very specific plans for replacing. You get the urgency and you get the weight of the race they're undertaking, in part because of how those races are shot. The way that Sonny drives, his element of chaos and risk-taking also adds a nice amount of suspense because you're never quite sure when that's going to come in. And you get things like the power of the crowd, you get the little bit of support from the pit crews, and I think they do a pretty good job during the races of balancing the reaction shots they have to get and the wider shots of like keeping track of cars in relationship to each other. I think it balances the edit pretty well during the racing. It never loses track of the energy despite having several things to worry about. Seemed like plenty of details paid attention to the F1 environment. Again, don't know what it normally looks like, but it felt pretty convincing to me. This is not my favorite soundscape in a racing movie ever, but it certainly does the job well. It helps with, I think, primarily keeping track for the audience of what the state of the cars is. When you get like these little stutters and slips of the tires and things like that, it helps you to kind of understand sonically what is happening with the car, even if you don't necessarily understand the sport. You can hear what's happening. So thankfully, there is quite a bit of the movie dedicated to the racing. Maybe a majority of it is related to a race of some sort, because the other stuff is definitely a weakness. The characters, the things that happen, the structure, the way they're captured, I think are uninspired, we'll say. If you haven't seen the movie, haven't seen the trailer, you can probably still pick out everything that happens based on just the story description, based on the type of movie it is. The characters are the type of characters you'd expect. They do what you'd expect. The main performances are all capable, but I don't think any of them really injects a unique sense of life into any of the characters. There's basically no effort to make conversations look or feel interesting. The movie is generally not very good at timing close-ups, in my estimation, and it often feels like it's kind of just cutting around for no particular purpose. It is a pretty fast-paced film, and often the edit is fairly fast-paced, so my assumption is they're just kind of like cutting around to whatever they got for conversations to keep the pace faster, to keep you engaged with something different, but it feels very aimless a lot of the time. And it's also got its fair share of sloppily handled melodrama moments, like with cut the close-up of someone being like, oh my gosh, it's the thing. You know what I mean. It's a sports drama to the studs. It does sports drama things. Maybe some of the goofiness is going to appeal to you. It's kind of annoying to me, but whatever. It is what it is. But despite the clear weaknesses, I still think of the movie positively, and I don't hold them against the film that much for a couple reasons. First, I still feel like it's a pretty quick watch. I was worried about the 156-minute runtime, but it feels shorter than that to me. So the weaknesses don't bog it down too far. And then the other is that it's a movie, I think, that largely succeeds at what it's trying to do. It's got plenty of racing action to appeal to, I think, the average viewer who is just going to go in for racing action. And the non-racing action doesn't kill the movie to me. So it does what it's trying to do, and it does what the audience wants to do, and I think that's worth something. So if you like the idea of a summer blockbuster with plenty of racing action, then I think F1 will be worth your time. Spoilers. There is nothing interesting to spoil.